So Alex, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yep. So my name's Alex. I founded Parks and Gardens, my company, 6 years ago. We did close in COVID, so I like to think that we had a rebirth after that in 21. So basically been going for 3 years now without interruption, and I've grown the business mainly inorganically, mainly through acquisitions, and then growing those acquisitions further.
Yeah, amazing. Cool. So I think everyone who's watching this probably knows who I am, but Pete from Emanda, and I've asked Alex to come here today as well for exactly this reason, which is actually talking about your experience with M&A and say that as in, obviously we've had a few chats before in the past. You've got some exciting ways or interesting ways that you look at businesses, which I felt were quite good. I know you're always on a hunt for good businesses, but today we'll have a bit of a chat just about some of those things you see, and hopefully let the people that we're talking to like to know a bit more about different ways that they'll be looked at as well if they're looking to be acquired or want to kind of also grow their businesses inorganically and find ways to do that. Just quickly, let's talk about that. So COVID, you shut down.
Yes.
What did you do? We just out in the jocks and hanging out and just on the couch watching TV, or
Pretty much. So we didn't know how long the shutdown was going to be.
Yeah.
But it was part of the mandate that our industry sort of couldn't operate at all. At least not with the clients I had previously. They were only allowing like council or government work, and anything else was not allowed. So initially we thought that might just be a week or two or things as it was then. Like, in hindsight, it's one thing, but we sort of hung on as long as we could, and then made the decision maybe a month or two in that, it's time to just close up and not, go insolvent or something. So we just shut completely, let off all staff, dropped all clients.
Yeah,
and then
it would have been hard. That would have been easy at all. That would have been very difficult.
Yes,
I know a lot of people obviously went through that time. But yeah, actually, the more you talk about it, it's like your business really. It's like what do you do? Like we can't be there. I remember trying to get gardening services, during it and then I realized then we got so locked down that I went with doing the gardening myself because I'm like, I don't have anything to do. Yeah, honestly, that's where a lot of you worked. During the day you're still working, but outside of the work time, I'm like, what are we doing? And it was full lockdown. So I butchered many a garden during lockdown. But that's good. Cool. Okay, so next question. So how big are you now? How many people are you now?
So we go between 15 and 20 staff. It fluctuates a bit with seasons.
Yeah.
At the moment, I think 18 staff, something like that.
Yeah.
We look after about 800 sites over
That's a lot.
all of Metro Melbourne.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
any more?
Yeah. No, it's more. And then obviously that I'm interested because you said in organic and inorganic. So organically, how are you doing that?
So as far as organically, I would say our organic is built off of our inorganic. Okay. So I like to try and acquire companies inorganically that I think have some growth potential that they've
got their
missed.
Organic pieces.
Yeah,
like, that's great. I'll take that and do. Yeah, that's awesome.
I try and sort of purchase those capabilities if they're if it works out financially and everything like that. And so then I sort of use the organic channels of that inorganic purchase to sort of grow.
I love that. I think a statement to come out of that is that Alex purchases companies and grows inorganically, purchasing their organic strategy. Yeah.
Pretty much.
And then I love it just on a standalone, but I think it's actually quite cool that you then strategically use that and go, you're missing a beat. Yeah. Like as in, I would presume if you're acquiring groups in, we'll learn a bit more about what those companies look like. But if you acquire them in, you'd be looking at the way that marketing, some social presence and go, hey, they're doing this. They already have this audience. We have got all the other bits we've already added, and so you're able to go deep in a marketing campaign, as in you're able to get to a bigger or broader company base in that, or how would you take advantage of their organic?
So it's been different every acquisition, but I try and build like a big fort, let's say, and obviously it's constantly expanding and we're adding on new capabilities and things, adding on new buildings to the castle, so to speak, that we didn't have.
We have a thing on our website called, are you looking, so one of the questions we have when you come to Emanda Group, are you looking to build your empire? Yeah, and so as you just said, it's like, I look at it like a fort. Yeah, and I'm like, so do I when you look at the inorganic growth. Yeah, so that's really quite cool.
You've got, like in my business, the core capability of, can we actually do gardening? That's pretty straightforward. But then we built out other little things like the admin team now because it's self-sufficient and things like that. Yep. And so on the first acquisition, for an organic example, we acquired a business that had a client list of about, 50 clients or something. and most of them we actually got rid of.
Yeah.
But there was one company in there that we thought that they just sort of missed altogether the potential with.
Yeah.
It's a large national company, and they were only doing like a few $100s a month worth of sort of work for them.
Yeah.
And while we were going around through the due diligence process, we met that client and spoke to them about why is it that they do so little for them. And it was because that business owner didn't want to do anymore. He didn't have any plans of sort of
It's like, I did my bit, I'm good.
And he was like, he only wanted to work 4 days a week or something, and he didn't want to take any more work, and so he just didn't go down there. And so we acquired it. I was obviously
straight back to that person.
And said, by the way, we've got like 5. I think at that time maybe 5 staff, something like that.
Yeah, right.
If you want to pass us more work, more than welcome to.
Yeah.
And then we've actually now, a few years later, we're their preferred supplier.
Yeah.
And we look after about 300 sites for them. They're one of our largest customers.
That's amazing. Yeah.
And so that part of it was sort of organic, making sure that they were happy with the work, our customer assurance, quality assurance, that sort of thing. And then them referring us to their sort of...
To their network. As well,
and so that part was organic, but we sort of...
I see.
Inorganically.
I can totally see the inorganic mix occurring through that. So tell me, if you were to put yourself into a kind of like, I don't know if you've done this before, I've looked at, without using like all the industry codes, from the ATO and other places, what would you title your industry?
It's a funny one because depending on where you look, they always title it differently.
That's what I mean. You look for the code and you go, I don't know, that code.
Yeah. Some would say the landscape services.
Yeah.
Some would say facility maintenance.
Yeah.
Some would say open space maintenance,
There's
gardening.
There's gardening, I've seen it. Yeah. And I say this interestingly because I looked in the industry just prior to this coming in and going, okay, let's have a bit more of an understanding of where we've done that research, and it does come across in about 9 different areas.
Yeah.
So I was interested in understanding where would you go with it. Let's just say it's in, kind of a mix between, I'd say, landscaping and facility, probably more than anything, because you've probably got longer term contracts, with government and other stuff like that, but also, probably residential, as well. You do residential as well?
We didn't until the last acquisition, actually.
Okay.
That acquisition was sort of specifically for that.
To get into that?
To get that extra sort of fort, so to speak. And that was an acquisition of sort of a high-end residential one, because one of the reasons we never went into residential was financially it wasn't sort of viable.
Yeah.
Going into the sort of market where we're dealing with only high-end, large-scale properties, mansions kind of thing.
I think it's good. I mean, I want to go and talk eventually as well a little bit about Game of Thrones and where you see the competition space and stuff like that, because we're talking about forts and kingdoms and that stuff, and I think it's a good theme to follow on with. If you look at it in your industry, though, you just said purchasing one that's more around the residential space. Do you have a kind of, let's talk about some of the things you look for. Do you have a kind of low bar, high bar to the revenue they're making? Is it a number of people? Anything you're looking for right now?
Yep. So I like to keep an open mind. I wouldn't say that there's, I don't have a specific checklist that I look with every time. I'll look at any opportunity that comes across for what it's worth.
Yep.
But as a general guide, I wouldn't look at anything under sort of 200,000 revenue.
Yep.
We want staff.
Yeah.
At least one.
So, okay. So you're just saying there needs to be at least a head count there. Yeah, as in it's not just a part-time person, like I'm trying to bring on staff and grow that. Yeah.
We don't want to acquire a sort of one-man band unless there's some other value hidden there somewhere.
No, it's good. And every industry is different. And I think you're quite unique in the way that when I first spoke to you, and even when we were talking in some of our groups and the networks we're in, was that, obviously we do advisory and we help people through this process, and you really put the hat on going, I love this and I do this myself in my own business. I wish there were more people like you. If I were to hand you 10 companies, so I've got 10 companies acting on behalf of, and I said to you, hey, shortlist these, what would be the first thing you do when you look at the business?
Yep. Revenue would be the first.
So P&L?
Yep. I'd have a look at their P&L, their ask price, obviously.
Yeah.
Because I guess that'll be different.
Is it the kind of thing where you go, revenue, ask price? Is that kind of the thing you would use and go, well, we'll see?
As a sort of quick, just to see if any...
Okay.
That's sort of a quick disqualifier, I find.
Notes. No, just kidding. Yeah, great, yeah.
If it works out that what they're asking for is reasonable with the revenue, I'd profit.
Okay, then you look at the business case.
Then I'll have a look at the business case, and then I'd probably be weighing up what work they do.
Mm-hmm.
That'd probably be the most valuable thing next. They could have the same revenue, but one could be that revenue working with 3 councils, and one could be that revenue with 500 individual people. And it'd be a lot simpler and better to integrate 3 large clients.
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
I love it. Yep. Okay, so here's another one for you is what's a no-go when you look at a business for you? You just go, nah, thanks.
Well, yeah, so no staff would be an obvious one.
Oh, yeah.
Or low margin. That would be a big no-go. I'd dive into that more to see why that might be, because sometimes you've got, owners, distribution and stuff like that.
Yeah,
so it might be actually quite a good margin. But
Yeah.
if there's low margin, staff issues and sort of culture. So I guess that's further down the track. That wouldn't be when I've got 10 in front of me.
When you look, I was going to say, if you're looking at the P&L, you're going, I'm doing this and this, and looking at profitability, you're getting an idea of going great. At that point, you probably might, without looking at a business case, you might not have an idea of where they may fit into your business, yeah? But it sounds like you would be taking or building a bit of strategy once you looked at them. Let's say this. Are you more strategically going out to market to say, I'm looking for now one of A, B, and C, yeah, like to add to this, to your overall, empire? Or are you kind of more looking at going, as they come to me, or as I see these ones, I'm like, how would I fit that in? Is it kind of more of a... More
on that side, yeah.
Oh, how would I fit them in?
Yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
Because the business does now pretty much operate without me, it's easier. I've got more time to look at more things. And I've found with the other acquisitions that some of the most value hasn't been in what I thought it would be.
Yeah.
Like it's not why I acquired those businesses.
Yeah, and they say, okay, so you've seen yourself that even through your own acquisitions, like that's not why I went looking for that, but it worked out well for 7,000 other reasons.
Yeah, there's one that I just went for revenue, just to get a boost and get some more staff on, and then they turned out to have a big social media and sort of they're sort of a sales funnel now.
Yeah, right.
And that came up in the sort of due diligence, and that was much more valuable to me than
100%.
the actual business.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So changing gears a little bit in own acquisition, because it's important with the team you've got. Who's the most important employee you have?
Can I say myself?
Well, it's recorded, so now you can. Outside of yourself. Okay, that's a good question. I'll say. So look, obviously, outside of yourself, who would you say is your most important kind of employee? Because you said yourself, the business can run without you now. Is that down to, obviously, the way you've set it up? Sure, and that's great and commendable. I think often that comes down to some people, in a team. That means that you can do that. So are there any particular key hires you made that unlocked you to be able to work on the business?
Yep, one was probably more of a promotion than a hire. Okay. There was someone started as a gardener, just a normal, like any of our hires. They sort of got promoted into sort of leading a team of gardeners, and then later on into sort of administration and management.
Project management, yeah.
And it's about 50-50 split between physically out there and admin.
Oh, really? Okay, so still on the tools.
Yeah, now and then.
Do you treat that as like your kind of general manager, or?
Yeah, I'd say he's probably one of the most valuable, because he's a very useful bridge between the physical work and the team in the office.
Yeah.
He's got the physical, knowledge of how the business runs on the ground, as well as
100%. Yes, there's a bridge to it, and I guess in terms of what you do, that's important. Another one I think I'm interested in as well is, all right, let's talk bigger picture. You're definitely, buying companies inorganically. Sorry, and through that, you're obviously growing inorganically. You said yourself as well, 20 people-ish?
Yeah.
Is your plan in next year double that, triple that, go crazy and get 100 of those people? And in that, and the empire, I mean, you don't have to name names. Is there someone you're looking at going, I want to take that person out?
Actually, I'm at a good point at the moment. We've sort of just done I don't want to say a restructure because it's not that serious, but we've sort of trimmed the fat a bit coming into winter.
I've done the opposite. Anyway, never go.
Well, in our sort of industry, the work does vary by season. And so we find in the warm seasons when everything's growing, we sort of need all hands on deck. And then we come to this year and all performance review processes and things that have not been going so well, we start to take action on that.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
A lot more now. So I'm actually happy with everyone. There's not many times in business I've said that.
Yeah.
But right now, I'm actually very happy with every single person on the team.
That's good. I think a lot of it will also come down to if you set up the right structures and processes for them to be able to know how to achieve that. So often I've seen businesses where they say, it's not gone so well, or blah, blah, and what do you have in place to kind of do those measurements to understand that? And does your team know what good looks like? Oh, they should just know, right? Like I'm like, no.
I did a lot of work on the management system.
Yep.
As we were sort of building up procedures and policies. Also on the physical side of the gardening, but I think more importantly in the admin. And so they've all got very clear KPIs and expectations around what should be done. And when it's not done, we might start with a verbal, conversation, then a formal warning, and then maybe some performance management later.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty clear, that they're aware of what they should be doing and what they shouldn't.
I think it's really something good that you raised there. So one of the key things that I think is important if you're going to not so much prolifically or start to acquire is to have a good understanding of your policies and procedures that the acquired group is coming into, because change management is really quite challenging. I can be sure that your first one was hard and then they got simpler from there. My wife's done a lot of stuff in a space where people do franchising. Yeah. So she worked with even some of her family businesses she was part of, and then for other businesses, basically franchising as a way of them optimizing their efficiencies. Yeah. Because if you've done all the policies and procedures, then things get a lot easier. So if you're looking at saying, I'm going to get someone else to run this, that's a really good way to go. How do I get myself out of the business and how do I do that? The reason I raise it is, have you seen through the operational procedures and stuff that you've got when you do acquire the company, do you very quickly get them into that, or do you just let them keep running?
No, so all the acquisitions I've done so far, we've basically merged into the company.
Yeah.
We haven't kept any entity operating completely separately.
Yeah.
And so inductions, a lot happens in the sort of due diligence and acquisition part of it.
Yeah.
Like getting to know their team and their current structures and things. But then once the acquisition's done, it's sort of this is what we're doing. You're part of us. These are our policies, procedures. We're going to train you, maybe shoulder to shoulder with these people, or depends on their role and things like that. But we try and get them on the same page as quickly as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so back to it. You said about efficiency, which I thought was really good, and you said, cool, you're happy with everyone in the position you've got into. Sounds like you've got everything kind of fun enough, all the weeds pulled out and everything in a really good space. I'm going to use puns because I just will. And 20 people. How will you grow to 50 or 60 or 100? And do you want to? Is this the aim? It sounds like it is, but
yeah, definitely the aim. Inorganically is a big part of that.
Yeah.
While we're doing that, obviously, that's a bit of an unpredictable thing. You never know what opportunity is going to come up and when. So we're not just relying on that. I've got some of my sort of senior management team on tenders constantly. And so we're continuing to sort of improve our position with that. We gather feedback after and things like that. And so we're sort of going at it two-pronged, I guess.
Yeah.
There's the business side of my business that's just tendering and trying to acquire it that way. And then there's me trying to inorganically do it.
Yeah, no, I think that's really, really quite good. All right, so say you get to 100. What's the landscape look like? Are you in a position now where are there bigger competitors that get involved? Do they notice you? What happens when that happens?
Yep. So we're in a funny position in the landscape actually that we're pretty unnoticed.
Yeah.
I like to think. I mean, you never know what's going on in other people's heads, but
yeah. Well, after this, we're about to put this everywhere, so you'd be no, I'm just kidding. Sorry. Yeah, but yeah.
And not naming any companies. Yeah.
That's awesome. We won't name companies. Yeah.
I don't think we've been noticed for our size.
Yeah.
And that partly has to do with sort of how we do business. I like to run things pretty under the radar. We don't go out very flash.
Big noting and touting. Yeah.
And so we're actually a similar size to our competitors.
Yeah.
The biggest ones, we might be a little bit smaller, but we're in that sort of ballpark. And I think if we got to 100, we would actually be the biggest.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Or close to, if not the biggest. And so I don't think if we got to 100, we wouldn't really have competitors of the size.
Yeah.
It would be more competitors that are sort of undercutting or things like that, trying to get it that way.
Yeah.
But I think at the moment we've probably got the most competition because we're sitting in a bracket where we're with the other sort of big companies in our space. And that's sort of all that we worry about right now.
So some of the things I'm just about to go into is a little bit more around things that you sniff out. Yeah, like what are the things you sniff out in a P&L? Yeah, and a balance sheet. So what we'll do now, Alex, as well, is a little session that I'd like to keep running with people, which is basically looking for skeletons through P&L, balance sheets. The first kind of thing that you look through, when I say that, is in the less formal DD. But if you were to, someone handed documents over to you, like, yeah, I'm going to go ask them about that. Even just that, I'm going to ask them about it because it's not necessarily a skeleton, just needs explanation. But any others, I'll start with the first one, which is one of the things I look at straight away. To give you an example, I do go and look at salaries, and I go and look at how much of this is actually, directors' fees, blah, blah. And I actually just go, yeah, cool. Can we all just balance that back to understand what they're actually paying everyone out? That's my first thing, or one of my first things I do.
Yep. I look at that as well. Probably not as the first thing. So I, just for mental sanity, like to go sort of top to bottom on a P&L. So I'll look at sort of their items before gross profit first, see if there's anything in there that doesn't make sense. So if they're, cost of goods, for example, if they're a consulting company and they've got 100,000 in cost of goods, what is that? Should they have any cost of goods, really?
Okay.
It's obviously relevant to the industry, but
we've got one here, and this one's a bit of a mix. But similar thing straight away. Yeah, like cost of sales. Like, what is this?
Yeah. And so for this company, those items might make sense. Obviously, at a quick look, if they were very unreasonable expenses, then I might dive in. Like if they were spending 100,000 a year on a domain name, something like that.
Oh yeah, So any kind of outliers, right? And jumping in. Yeah.
Otherwise, advertising, I would look at if they've got ad spend, how much is that actually generating?
Yeah.
How closely is that tied to the revenue?
That's really cool. So you're kind of looking straight at the cost of acquisition. Yeah. You're just going, you spend this, therefore, how much is it costing you to get revenue in the door?
Yeah. And if they're spending that ad spend and all of their work comes from referrals, then that might be a potential area we can improve or make more.
Take advantage of.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Depreciation, obviously, I'd just look at that, see what they're depreciating, add it back potentially.
You just write it off.
Yeah.
It is. Just write it off. Yeah.
I think most of the skeletons sort of come in the sort of vague line items. Like I've seen line items like general expenses or wages and salaries is a big one. Motor vehicle expenses, things like that.
Yep.
And having a look at what feeds those.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that. One of the ones I see, like even you can see it here, like motor vehicle expenses. Yeah. So this company, whilst it's a mock company, is actually interesting enough, without you knowing anything about it, just jumping straight to P&L, which is fun. This company is more, they actually do driving. It's a driving school.
Okay.
Yep. So you're like, well, see, that would actually make sense. Otherwise, what is that entire motor vehicle expense across the years? Yep. But then the other thing I find interesting when you look at that is, so if they're a learning, this is when I look at this one, is what's the rent?
Yep.
Yeah. Like
if you're having a facility.
Yeah. Is it a facility that they've got? Like, what is that? Why are you paying rent if you're out in the car? Yeah.
And even the interest expense item.
Yeah.
I would assume that's car finance on this sort of business. Yeah. But is that reasonable, and have they disclosed those loans as part of the DD?
Yep.
If we've gone in and they say, we've just got a loan for $10,000 and you're paying $5,000 a month in interest. Something sort of doesn't add up there.
It doesn't add up as to how that happened. A quick one as well, as you mentioned that, one of the things that I've seen, which I think is quite interesting, is when you get on not so much the loan one, but you talk about it with the cars, is when someone, and this is a common one we see with business owners, it doesn't matter if they're small, maybe later on down the track, they're even 2-3 million revenue. And it's like, cool, so what's that car? Not so much even the lease, but they've bought the car through the company. And one of the questions I see the buyer going, so do I get the car?
Yeah.
It's like, no, well, it's branding, and they've done the full branding. It's like, well, it's company assets, and it gets into a really interesting conversation. So I'm not sure if you see that at all, because you would have people with the,
yes,
I'm going to guess, with branded cars.
Yes, it has come up before. Every time we've sort of had a conversation about, what are they happy to include and what are they not, and how that might affect the valuation, and what we're willing to pay, sort of thing. But if generally
people's houses in there,
there has been one where there was a property tied up in it.
Yeah, right. I've seen that too. Yeah,
which was crazy because not so much on the P&L, but on the balance sheet.
Yeah, on the balance sheet. I was going to say,
we couldn't believe, we opened up the balance sheet and it was hundreds of thousands of equity. And we're like, hang on a minute, this doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Unless we're getting a crazy good deal.
So did you buy it and take the house?
We didn't actually acquire it at all. It turned out to be too much of a nightmare.
Too much of a nightmare. And that's the thing as well. Yeah. Which I think is a key thing that we do this. One of the reasons we do these sessions, and it's awesome doing it with you, because you've obviously looked at a lot of businesses and brought them in, is important for people out there to understand that due diligence is actually quite critical when you're on the buy side, analysing those things. But we always talk about defensive due diligence. I know it sounds kind of weird, but the reason we say this is that companies that are actually selling is to know, you don't just put it out there and go, well, we'll hope. So you should know what questions are going to come back, have done some kind of work somewhere to clean things up, to say, I have an answer for this, or get yourself into a state ready to actually sell. But there's often a time when I guess you're working with people in this sort of state where they're like, wait till that's a conversation.
From my perspective as a buyer, all of my acquisitions have been in my industry, so that we've got very similar line items and
So
things
good
like
point.
that.
Yep. So you're like, why is that there? Yep.
And so anything that's out of the ordinary is pretty easy for me to spot in that. But I think in general, in a general sense of acquisitions, I'd be looking for any items that don't fit the business model. Like this one has IT software development for a car, training thing that makes no sense.
I love that you
I'd
spotted
want to
that.
know why that's there.
So they're building an actual application to help people pass the learners and P-Plate exam online. So they've got an actual educational piece. They're building some software alongside them doing that. So it's good that you spotted it.
And so if I was pretending, I was going to acquire this company, I would be asking why and how much, have they done some projection? Are they going to get some revenue from that?
And what I found out afterwards is half the revenue came from that.
There you go.
And I went, are you a software? Then it gets even more interesting. Like, are you a software company or are you a, It's
and then I'd probably, if I was coming in from an acquisition perspective, I'd probably spin that off as a separate company.
Yeah, that's right. You'd go, why? Well, it could just affect the, it'll affect the multiples. Yeah. So are you with this or are you that? And so you might be doing yourself a disjustice in either one of those. Yeah. And that's why you split it out. Like I said, your knowledge around the space, because you've done it for yourself, but you've done an MBA as well. Yeah. I believe. Yeah. I think, have various thoughts on MBAs, and I'm just going to say that out loud, but I think your practical experience is what outweighs everything there, which is kind of cool, both having to build a business, but also doing that. So thanks for going through the skeleton session with us today.
No worries.
Nice.